law is okay as long as they've got to enforce it and they've got to follow up. We're just not doing enough yet.
We are not doing enough. What we need to do is to make sure that if we do indeed have legislation in place, that it is enforced and that individuals who decide to bully, whether it's on the internet or in schools or in the workplace, are held accountable for their actions. It just appears that this type of behavior is accepted in society as a whole. And until we decide that we are not going to allow such behavior to occur, unfortunately, we're going to continue to hear of situations where individuals are taking their lives as a result of bullying.
In the case of Rehtaeh Parsons, I want to hear what you have to say here, because you just said that we all think it's okay what's going on online. Had we seen those pictures, I think I, for one, would not have thought that that was okay.
Right, but the individuals who did see those pictures obviously thought it was okay, and they were more than willing to share those pictures with others. And to me, that represents a lack of concern for others. And I understand we're talking about students, and young people nowadays seem to not understand the impact that such behavior is having on others. And they think just because they're on the internet, no one is going to do anything to them. So it's okay if they go ahead and they share pictures or images such as this nature, not recognizing the impact that it's having on those who are in those pictures.
So we need consequences that I was going to use the phrase that will make an example of them, but maybe that is the proper phrase.
Yes, consequences. We need to have more consequences in place, and people need to know that if you decide to post images such as the ones that we are discussing, then you must be held liable to the standards that we have set and be willing to accept the consequences. Until we identify what those consequences are and begin to actually hold people accountable, we are going to unfortunately continue to have this type of situation. This not only occurs in schools, but it also occurs in workplaces as well. And based on the research that I've done, 10% of individuals are considering homicide or suicide as viable options to eliminate the bullying in their lives. So it is epidemic, and it's an issue that needs to be addressed in our schools. It needs to be addressed in our workplaces and in society as a whole.
10%?
Yes.
Yeah, I understand the word epidemic when you start talking those kinds of numbers. Dr. Lisa Barrow is an assistant professor at the Goodman School of Business at Brock University. She's done extensive research on bullying in schools and at the workplace. So nobody, I think, right now disputes the severity of the bullying that was aimed at Rehtaeh Parsons. But there's the big question, I think, that a lot of politicians and lawmakers struggle with is, where do we go from, the lower forms of bullying, the gentler forms of bullying, and then take it up to the awful form of bullying that Rehtaeh faced. Do you know what I'm getting at? How would the consequences, should they reflect the level of bullying?
Right, I think what we need to do is identify what the bullying behaviors are, and then say, if you are involved in such behavior, then these are the consequences. Very similar to if I am driving and I'm texting, I know what the consequences are. So I think it needs to be very clear. People need to have a clear understanding of what the behaviors are, and then the consequences, and then the enforcement of those consequences. It's not enough to say, well, you may face 1 year in jail. You actually have to put people through the system and follow through, or else people will think that the legislation is just there to kind of calm society's feelings right now.
And so
there needs to be more teeth behind the actions that are taken.
So there are some laws out there that aren't being enforced.
yes, there are laws that are being enforced. For example, in Ontario, we have the Health and Safety Act, which covers workplace violence, harassment, and bullying. However, when targeted individuals contact, for example, the Ministry of Labor, the Ministry of Labor will say that they're unable to enforce it. It's up to the organization. So basically, the legislation isn't worth the paper it's written on, and so victims are saying, well, if I can't get help from the Ministry of Labor, I can't get help from the organization, then, I may as well consider suicide or even homicide, because it's at that point where they're desperate. They don't know what else to do. They don't know where to turn. And when you're involved in the bullying situation, it affects the very core of a person's being, because no one seems to understand the depth of what is happening, the pain, the loneliness, the isolation that is occurring, because most people say, well, you're sensitive, or, maybe the person really didn't mean it. So we need to have more steps in place, more options in place for individuals to take to avoid these situations.
Yeah, because right now it's so subjective. Some person gets to make that decision. And we need to be able to make it so it's a system that there's no decision to make. It's black and white.
Exactly. And it's very similar to sexual harassment. And if we use sexual harassment as an example, we know what types of behavior can be construed as sexual harassment. And therefore we know if we participate in those types of behaviors, we understand the consequences. We need to have the same type of definition and understanding of what bullying is and what the bullying behaviors are, and then once again tie the consequences to that behavior and then enforce the consequences.
And that's a great comparison, the sexual harassment, because 20, 30 years ago, women could have been brushed off if they'd come forth with a sexual harassment complaint, just as bullying victims are being brushed off today. So I appreciate that. I want to ask you one last question. I want to ask you what it's been like, because you have done all this research on bullying in schools and at the workplace and the like. Does it take its toll on you to be talking to many of the victims as you've had, or to look at these case studies and the like? It's because being a bullying victim is a very lonely job.
That is correct. However, no, it doesn't take its toll on me, because my perspective is that for every person that I can encourage, for every person that I can let them know that you're not losing your mind, these things are happening, for every person that I can stop from committing suicide, it's worth it. If I can save one life. And so what I see myself doing is saving people's lives. And what I try to encourage other people to do is to get involved and to see it as if they are saving people's lives, whether it's in high schools, whether it's in the workplace. We need to save each other's lives. We need to protect one another. We need to look after each other. And if we come alongside someone who is being bullied and say, we understand and we're going to do something about what is occurring, then we have done our job.
It's been a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Dr. Lisa Barrow.